Hello and welcome to Neo Psychology with me, your teacher, Mr. Neo, the channel where I teach online psychology lessons to my brilliant students. Let's get started. We're looking at today, Lesson 3, Control of Variables 2. Here's the starter. Participant variables and situational variables. Extraneous variables can be subdivided into participant variables and situational variables. Participant variables are any individual differences between participants that may affect the DV or the dependent variable. Situational variables are any features of the experimental condition that may affect the dependent variable. Here's a question. Separate the list of extraneous variables below into participant variables and situational variables. So let's get started. So we've got extraneous variables with the table on the right. Participant or situational? Say it out loud. Whether. Is that participant or situational? Participant or situational? Say it. Situational. Good. Age. Participant variable or situational variable? Participant, well done. Personality. Come on. Yes. Participant. Gender. Say it out loud. I can't hear you. Yes. Participant, good. Well done. Motivation. How motivated are they? Is that a participant or situational? Easy, exactly. Participant, like you said. Concentration. Participant, again, well done. Temperature. Assuming it means temperature of the room rather than temperature of the participant, it's situational. Time of the day. That is a situational variable. Noise. Yes, situational. Intelligence. Yeah, that is participant. And finally, the instructions given to the participants is situational. Well done. How many did you get? You got them all right? Club clogs. Right. Here we go. Here are our learning objectives 2 today. Only 2. We're going to show comprehension and apply knowledge of randomization and identify and analyze standardization. Let's start with learning objective 1, shall we? Randomization is somewhat what you expect it to be. In any investigation, there are simple steps that the researcher can take to minimize the effect of extraneous and confounding variables on the outcome. One of these is the use of randomization, which refers to the use of chance wherever possible to reduce the researcher's influence on the design of the experiment. In short, this is an attempt to control investigator effects. For example, a memory experiment may involve participants recalling words from a list. The order of the list should be randomly generated so that the position of each word is not decided by the experimenter. You know, they might be manipulated in a way that would make it easier to have people memorize it, or maybe harder, depending on what you wanted. In an experiment where participants are involved in a number of different conditions, the order of these conditions should be randomly determined. For example, in the energy drink experiment, we want to know what quantity of Red Bull causes chattiness. We may set up 4 experimental conditions. Drinking water would be condition A, which would be the control condition. Drinking 100 milliliters of Red Bull, condition B. Drinking 200 milliliters, condition C. And drinking 300 milliliters of Red Bull, condition D. With me so far? Hope so. If all participants were to take part in all 4 conditions, the order in which these conditions were completed would need to be randomized for each participant. This is an alternative to counterbalancing. This will be discussed in future lessons. Right, so randomization. If you are asked to give it a definition of randomization, you need to use the word chance, okay? The use of chance in order to control for the effects of bias when designing materials and deciding the order of conditions. Yes, So randomization is the use of chance in order to control for the effects of bias when designing materials and deciding the order of conditions. Question. You need to divide participants into two conditions, Group A and Group B. This needs to be done randomly. How will you go about randomly assigning participants into the two conditions? Right? There's lots of different ways, but the key thing is it needs to be done randomly. Answer. It doesn't matter how you divide the participants into the two groups as long as it is done randomly. This means each participant has an equal chance of being selected. So random methods can include something as simple as the roll of a dice. You know, if you get even, you go into this group. If you get odd, you go into this group until one is full up, and then the rest just go into the other group. Names out of a hat, that would be random as well. Flipping a coin, heads or tails. And then, or like a random number generator. You can download random number generators. So, it may look like a hat, but it is actually a piece of scientific equipment used to select a random sample. And that is it. That's randomization. It's just about making sure things are random. Randomly assigning people to different conditions. It's important. Because if you assign them like first come through the door, maybe those that come through the door, they're more likely to have a certain personality trait that is similar to something else, and therefore it wouldn't be random. Identify one thing you learned about randomization. The fact that you can use a coin or a hat or a dice. That's interesting. Why do you think learning about randomization is important? It's to control for bias. How does randomization apply in real life? And what questions has randomization raised for you? What are you still wondering about? There we go, that's it. Randomization, really simple, really easy. Let's tick that one off already. Done. Now we're on to identifying and analyzing standardization. What is this? Let's find out, shall we? Don't worry, I'll hold your hand through it all, you'll be fine. Standardization, not literally. As far as is possible with an investigation, all participants should be subject to the same environment, information, and experience. To ensure this, all procedures are standardized. In other words, there is a list of exactly what will be done in the study. This includes standardized instructions that are read to each participant. So standardization, that's all it is. Standardization, using exactly the same formalized procedures and instructions for all participants in a research study. This is also the reason why it's important, because your research might need to be replicated by someone else, because sometimes you doing the research on your own and you find some findings that some people might find unbelievable. They replicate your study. How can they replicate your study if it hasn't been standardized? You need to have a standardized list of procedures to show how you did it, so someone can replicate it and potentially find similar findings and therefore support your claim. So standardization, using the exact same formalized procedures and instructions for all participants in a research study. Question. Use your device to find out what were the standardized procedures for Milgram's 1963 research into obedience to authority. This is from the Social Influence Unit. Milgram used a set of prompts for the participants. What were they, and how were they standardized? Right, this is the answer. In Milgram's study, it was the study of the electrocutions, right, where they told someone you had to, they were communicating with someone behind a wall, and they were saying A, B, C, or D, pick the right answer. If they got it wrong, you had to give them electric shock. Within the experiment, the person in the experiment, it was quite psychologically harming for a lot of them. They didn't really want to be there, and they didn't want to administer these electric shocks because they were potentially harmful, and you could hear someone screaming and being in pain. So a lot of them didn't want to do it. So there were certain prods, standardized prods, that the experimenter in the room had to say to them to remain in the study, and these prods were as follows. Number one was, please continue. If they continue saying, no, I want to leave, the next prod was, the experiment requires that you continue. If they said, no, I still want to leave, the third prod will be, it's absolutely essential that you continue. And if they still said that, the fourth prod was, you have no other choice but to continue. If they said after that point that they wanted to leave, then they would let them leave the experiment only then. Why is it important to have prods though? It's important that the procedures are standardized to ensure all participants have the same experience and no one participant is prodded more or less to continue with the experiment than any other. Right? So for example, if you had, so this experiment was an obedience to authority. If in one situation one participant said, I want to leave, and they said, all right, sure, no worries, off you go, mate, I'll see you later. But for another one, they said, I want to leave, and then they did all these 4 prods. It's not really fair, is it? Because one of them would have had more prods. Therefore, you have to make it standardized. You have to have it even, exactly the same for each participant. And that's standardization, right? Really simple. Make sure there's a standardized list of things, and you make a list and a sort of all the procedures to know what it is. Identify one thing you learned about standardization. Why do you think learning about standardization is important? How does standardization apply in real life? And what question has standardization raised for you? What are you still wondering about? There we go. That is standardization. Easy. We're onto the plenary already. We're only 10 minutes into the lesson. This is a short one. Plenary. Got some multiple choice questions. From this lesson and last lesson, how good's your memory? Mine's awful. Right. Luckily, I recorded all these videos today. Number 1, which best describes a confounding variable? Is it A, variables other than the IV that may have systematically affected the DV? B, any variable that may potentially affect the IV or DV? C, any cue from the researcher or research situation that may reveal the aim of the study? Or is it D, any effect of the investigator's behavior that may affect the outcome of the research? Which one do you think it is? Have another read over them. I'm going to wait. Got your answer? It was A, any variable other than the IV that may have systematically affected the DV. Number 2. Individual differences between participants may affect the DV. Best describes which of the following? A, extraneous variables. B, confounding variables. C, situational variables. Or D, participant variables. Well, because there are individual differences between participants, I'm going to have to go for D, participant variables. Even though participant variables is an extraneous or confounding variable, but more specifically, it's a participant variable. Number 3. The use of chance in order to control for the effects of bias may describe which of the following? Listen to those key words. Chance, control, bias. There's only one word you should be thinking of. A, situational variables. B, demand characteristics. C, standardized instructions. D, randomization. Sort of gave it away there, but it is, of course, D, randomization, right? Those are the keywords you should be linking to randomization. Chance, control, and bias. Number 4. Standardization is useful when it comes to investigations being what? A, reinterpreted. B, replicated. C, complicated. Or D, estimated. I did talk about this a little bit earlier. It is B, replicated. Number 5. Which of the following refers to the use of chance to minimize the influence of the researcher on the design of the study? Is it A, standardization, B, randomization, C, counterbalancing, or D, investigator effects? You're using the word chance, but it's talking about minimizing the influence of the researcher, so it's going to have to be randomization. Had you there, didn't I? Had myself as well. Number 6. Any unwanted influence of the researcher on the outcome is an investigator effect. Is that true or false? Any unwanted influence of the researcher on the outcome is an investigator effect. True or false? I'm going to have to go with true. Yes, true, good. There we go. Next question, number 7. Standardized instructions should be administered to all participants in an experiment. True or false? Standardized instructions should be administered to all participants in an experiment. True or false? That is true, right? Your instructions need to be standardized. Yes. Number 8. Again, true or false? Easy. Extraneous variables can be subdivided into performance variables and specific variables. True or false? No, it's not this. It was participant and situational. We did it in the starter. Number 9. Match up the terms with their correct description. We got demand characteristics, we got randomization, we got standardization. Making sure that all participants are subject to the same instructions and experience. I know. The use of change to reduce the researcher's influence on the design of the investigation. Okay. And participants interpret cues from the experimenter or investigator effects and research situation. They may change their behavior as a result. Okay. Demand characteristics is the last one. Randomization is the middle one. And standardization is the top one. There we go. Number 10. Match up the terms with their correct description. You've got different types of variables here. Extraneous, confounding, participant, and situational. Here we go. I'll read these, don't worry. I'll do all the hard work. Right. Variables that do vary systematically with the IV. Nuisance variables that do not vary systematically. Any individual difference between the people taking part that may interfere with the outcome, and any aspect of the experimental environment that may interfere with the outcome. So extraneous variables are the nuisance variables. The confounding variables are the ones that do vary systematically. Participant variables are any individual difference between the people, so individual differences, and the situational variables are like experimental environments, conditions. Could be the temperature of the room, it could be the light, it could be the time of the day you do it. There we go. How many questions did you get out of 10? Are you an absolute legend? I got a 10 out of 10. Maybe. Probably not though. What? No, of course you did. You're smashing it. You're well good. Right, there we go. Thank you for joining today's lesson. You've been absolutely brilliant. I've been better. Well done, my neo-psychologists. Great work today. Make sure to write up the notes for the lesson, for next lesson. I've been Mr. Neo. God bless and peace.
I'm feeling like Will. I feel like a prince. I'm feeling myself. I'm loaded with bills. Cause I wasn't blessed with no Uncle Phil. Don't know how it feels. I wanted to flex. They told me to chill. I'm making a flip. My life is a flick. Now load up the film.